Stacey Abrams' gubernatorial run will be met with some challenges as Georgia lawmakers' voter suppression efforts are among the most aggressive in the country. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak with Representative Hank Johnson about voter suppression in Georgia and Democrats' lack of urgency on voting rights reform. Take a listen. There was a historic election last election cycle. You elected two Democratic senators. You also delivered the state for President Joe Biden. But since then, Georgia has been at the forefront of a wave of voter suppression that is sweeping across the country. I want to just get you to weigh in on what you see happening in your state of Georgia on the voting rights front.
Our legislature is controlled by Republicans. What they have done is bought into the big lie. The big lie being that somehow there was a election theft on November 3rd, and then it happened again on January the 5th when we elected two United States senators from the Democratic Party and shifted power from the Grim Reaper, Mitch McConnell, into the hands of Democrats. And so since those things have happened, we've had the insurrection of January 6th, and then we've had a spate of states imposing restrictions on voting in response to their acceptance of this big lie, which they know is not true. And Georgia has been ground zero for voter suppression for so long. We were the first state to impose draconian voter ID measures on people. And then in 2021, our legislature back in March passed Senate Bill 202, which was designed to stop absentee voting almost in its tracks while making in-person voting more difficult, and at the same time imposing a opportunity for the state legislature to come into counties and cities and take over their voting processes and run those processes from a partisan perspective right out of the state legislature. And other states have now followed Georgia's hand. They are doing the same thing. 19 other states in the union have imposed voter suppression legislation on their voters as a response to this big lie of Donald Trump.
Specifically in Georgia, do you think it is all about the big lie, or do you think some of it is in response to just an incredible surge in the black population of Georgia? The black population of Georgia doubles from 1990 to now. They go from about 25% of the population in 1992 to now about 33% of the population, and that proved to be really consequential in shifting the state over to Democrat control on the presidential side, but also giving Georgia two senators who are Democrat, one of whom is black.
Well, that big lie is a outgrowth of the desire to make America great again, which was code word for make America white again. They actually want to take us back to a time when white males were the only ones who had rights in this country. As a result of the 2020 census, which we know undercounted black and brown people, particularly in Georgia, we know that. But even with those flawed statistics, whites make up only 51% of Georgia's population as of 2020. And it's not going to get any better for them. And they're doing everything they can to try to cling to power. And that's why it causes them to impose these voter suppression games on the people of Georgia, right, who 34% of Georgia is black.
So Governor Kemp is expected to sign into law soon new political redistricting maps that strengthen Republican control of the legislature. Congresswoman Lucy McBath's district has become deeply Republican under the new lines. Once these maps are made, they're made. So what do you think can be done about what is happening on the redistricting side, both in Georgia and in other states in this country?
Yeah, on the short term, it looks like the new redistricting map in Georgia is going to result in the loss of one Democratic seat and the gaining of one Republican seat. So instead of a 8-6 ratio of Republicans to Democrats in the House of Representatives, it looks like it's going to be a 9-5 situation as we move forward into 2022. That's not going to remain that way. And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is one of the most outspoken Trump Republicans in the country from Georgia, was very dissatisfied with the district that she wound up with, because it includes part of what was the 6th district, which is where Lucy McBath won 2 elections. They have made that district now a district that would vote for Trump by 15 points. And so it looks like it cannot be won by a Democrat today. But Marjorie Taylor Greene was upset with this district because she realizes that within the next few years, it's going to convert to a Democratic district because of the number of Black and brown people who will continue to move in and populate that district. So they can run, but they can't hide. But we do have a short-term dilemma, and that short-term dilemma, due to redistricting across the nation, could result in the House being overtaken by Republicans in 2022. And if that should happen, they are already talking about, instead of Kevin McCarthy being the Speaker of the House, they want to bring Donald Trump in as Speaker of the House, as they can do constitutionally. And with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris being in his way to regaining the presidency, one way or the other, he's running in 2024, or he causes something to happen to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and then the presidency comes to him in that way. It's scary to think about Donald Trump as Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Yeah, as scary as that is, then that leads to the next question, which is, why are not Democrats doing more to lean in on the issue of a voting rights bill passing in the Senate? The president, do you believe that the president is using the bully pulpit to the fullness of its effect on this issue?
Well, I think the president is being very judicious with his use of his bully pulpit. He used it to get the American Rescue Plan passed. He used it to get the Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Deal, passed. And he's using it now to ensure that we can get the Build Back Better legislation passed. And I hope we can get that done within the next couple of weeks.
Yes, Congressman, I understand all that. And that'll be great. All those things are great. The provisions in the Build Back Better are great. But you know as well as I know, if we do not deal with the voting rights issue, that's the whole ballgame. Because anybody can come in and pass another slate of legislation if people can't vote that will be just as harmful as this is helpful. Voting is the whole thing. I'm specifically asking you, do you believe that he is using the full force of the bully pulpit on the voting rights issue?
Well, I believe that Joe Biden will use the full force and weight of his office to help ensure that we do filibuster reform so that we can get voting rights legislation passed through the Senate. The House has already passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act. It's already passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, H.R. 4. Both of those bills currently are in the Senate. There have been 4 filibusters preventing those 2 bills from coming to the floor of the Senate for a vote in the past year. And now the Senate has introduced the Right to Vote Act in the Senate,
Right.
the Senate
Right.
itself. So I'm looking forward to President Biden bearing down on Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin to get them to come off of their opposition to filibuster reform. And I believe that that's going to happen. And then we can get voting rights legislation through the Senate by a simple majority. 50 votes plus the vice president is enough to pass voting rights in the Senate if we do filibuster reform. And I do believe President Biden will weigh in at the appropriate time to get it done.
Really appreciate you joining us tonight and weighing in on this issue of voting rights, which I really believe is a crucial issue for the Republic. Thank you so much.